All right, welcome back to Cursed Chambers. Today's deep dive comes courtesy of one of you in the comments who pointed us towards one of Scotland's darkest and frankly weirdest legends. It just proves that you guys have the best, most twisted ideas, so please keep them coming. Now, when you picture Glamis Castle, you probably think of a fairy tale. It's the picturesque childhood home of the Queen Mother, a place of royal garden parties and general nobility. But behind that postcard-perfect facade lies a story so dark, it makes the other ghost stories in this famously haunted castle look like a trip to Disneyland. The legend goes that for nearly a century, locked away in a secret bricked-up room, the noble Bowes-Lyon family kept their greatest secret, an heir born so horrifically deformed, they erased him from history. They called him the Monster of Glamis. So the question is, how does a loving aristocratic family just wall up their kid? And is this just a spooky campfire tale? Or is it the story of the most brutal cover-up in royal history, hiding a truth they prayed would never get out? We're going to unpack the world of 19th century aristocratic pride, where a flaw in the bloodline was a fate worse than death. Then we'll follow the timeline of this family's chilling decision. And finally, we'll open the chamber door ourselves and ask the big question, what really happened to Thomas Lyon Bowes? It turns out the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones with claws, but the ones in tailored suits trying to protect their reputation. Stick around. All right, let's dive in. To even begin to process a story as frankly bonkers as a monster in a castle, you have to do more than just know the legend. You have to understand the world that created it. You have to understand the time, the place, and most importantly, the absolutely twisted set of rules that governed the people involved. This isn't just a ghost story, you see. It's a story about pressure, pride, and the paralyzing fear of shame. First, let's talk about the place itself, Glamis Castle. When we say castle, I don't want you picturing some cute, polished-up tourist trap. I mean, it is that now, but that's not its soul. You have to picture this thing as it was, and as it had been, for centuries. It's not just a building, it's a statement, a giant stone middle finger to the Scottish weather, to rival clans, and to the very passage of time. This place has stood in Angus, Scotland for over 600 years, and its stones are soaked in history, and well, probably a lot of other fluids we don't want to think about. This castle's resume is impressive. It's the ancestral seat of the Earls of Strathmore and Kinghorn, the Bowes-Lyon family. It has ties to the Scottish royal line going way back. Shakespeare liked the name so much, he made Macbeth the Thane of Glamis, which historically is nonsense. The timeline is all wrong, but it tells you something. It tells you that even centuries ago, this place had a certain reputation. It sounded old and powerful and a little bit scary. Before it was famous for being the Queen Mum's cozy childhood home, it had a reputation for, let's say, less wholesome activities. It was a place of power, intrigue, and bloodshed. So this was never just a house. It was a fortress, a symbol, and as we'll soon see, a very effective prison. Now let's get to the most important part, the rules of the game. To understand the almost unbelievable decision at the heart of this story, you have to understand the mindset of the 19th century British aristocracy. And let me tell you, it was a whole different operating system for reality. Think of a noble family from this era like the Bowes-Lyons, less like a family and more like a high-end luxury corporation. Let's call it Strathmore Incorporated. Their product wasn't land or money, not really. Their core product was their name, their bloodline. It was a brand built and curated over centuries. Every marriage was a merger, every child was a new product launch, and the single most important goal of the corporation was to protect the brand's integrity at all costs. The blood had to be pure, the lineage had to be perfect, and the image presented to the world had to be one of flawless, divinely approved superiority. This brings us to rule number one of this weird little universe, the system of primogeniture. This is a fancy word for a very simple and very brutal concept. The winner takes all. The firstborn son didn't just get a bigger slice of the inheritance, he got everything. The title, the lands, the castles, the fortune, the political power. He was the CEO in waiting for Strathmore Inc. Every other child, a second son, a third, all the daughters. Well, they were basically luxury accessories. They were there to be married off strategically to enhance the family's power, but they had no claim to the central prize. This system put an insane, almost unimaginable amount of pressure on one single person, the heir. He wasn't just a boy, he was the vessel for the family's entire legacy, the walking, talking embodiment of their past and their only guarantee for a future. So here's a question for you. What happens to a system like that? A system built entirely on the perfection of that one single heir when the product comes off the assembly line with a defect. This is where we get to the dark heart of it all, the problem of imperfection. You have to remember, this was an age before modern genetics, before our understanding of congenital disorders, and frankly, before the widespread adoption of, basic human empathy in these matters. In the cold, hard calculus of 19th century aristocracy, a severe birth defect in the heir wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a public catastrophe. It was seen as a sign of something rotten in the bloodline, a taint. Some even saw it as a divine judgment, a punishment for some hidden sin. It suggested the brand Strathmore Incorporated was faulty. And in a world built on image and reputation, that was a death sentence. A deformed heir couldn't lead armies, he couldn't sit in the House of Lords with authority, and he would struggle to secure a powerful marriage to continue the precious perfect line. He was in their eyes a dead end, a catastrophic public relations nightmare that threatened to devalue the entire family enterprise. And that obsession, that terror of appearing flawed, is the absolute key to understanding the choice that was made. It's a choice that seems monstrous to us, but in their twisted world, it might have felt logical, necessary even. And just to add another layer of gloom to our setting, remember that Glamis Castle was not a blank slate waiting for a tragedy. This place, as I mentioned, had pre-existing conditions. It was already considered one of the most haunted places in all of Britain. The family and the locals were living with stories that were already centuries old. You had the legend of Earl Beardy, a famously colorful member of the extended family from the 15th century, a man whose two primary hobbies were gambling and offending God, and he was absolutely determined to combine them. The story goes that one Sabbath night, he was demanding a game of cards, and none of his terrified courtiers would play him. So in a fit of rage, he roared that he would play the devil himself. And well, you know what they say, speak of the devil, and he shall appear. A tall man in a dark coat supposedly knocked on the door, sat down and proceeded to play cards with the Earl for his soul. The game, they say, is still going on, locked away in a secret chamber in the castle. The sounds of the Earl's swearing and the rattling of dice supposedly echoing through the stone on stormy nights. Then you had the even more tragic and very real history of Janet Douglas Lady Glamis. In 1537, she was accused of witchcraft by King James V, who really hated the Douglas clan. It was a politically motivated charge, the 16th century equivalent of getting canceled by someone who has an army. Despite there being no evidence, she was burned at the stake in Edinburgh. Her ghost, the Grey Lady, is said to haunt the castle chapel, a permanent, sorrowful resident. So you see the pattern here. Glamis was already a place where people believed that men could be walled up in secret rooms for eternity. It was already a place where the memory of profound injustice lingered for centuries. It was a place where the line between this world and the next was famously terrifyingly thin. The castle was already cursed long before our story even begins. The stage was set. The family had their brutal rules of perfection. The castle had its dark, secret-keeping reputation. All it needed was a specific human tragedy to connect the two. And on October 21st, 1821, it got one. Because on that day, the heir to all of this, the next CEO of Strathmore Inc., was born. And the moment he entered the world, something was terribly wrong. Now we need to talk about what happened next. So we have our setting. A family utterly obsessed with the perfection of their bloodline. A castle that's basically a five-star hotel for ghosts and ghouls, and a rigid system where only one flawless son can carry the family name forward. The board is set, the pieces are in place. Now it's time to light the fuse and watch it all go horribly wrong. This is the part of the story where we move from the why to the what. This is the story of a choice, a cover-up, and a secret that refused to stay buried. Our story begins, as these tragedies so often do, with a moment that should have been a joyous celebration. The date is October 21st, 1821. Inside the grand walls of Glamis Castle, the wife of the 11th Earl of Strathmore is giving birth. This is it. The big moment for Strathmore Incorporated. The new CEO is arriving. The entire future of the dynasty, the continuation of that hallowed centuries-old name, rests on this one single event. The bells are ready to be rung, the toasts are ready to be made. And then the baby is born. And the moment that should have been a celebration of life turns into something else entirely. A moment of stunned, horrified silence. Because according to the legend, the child, a boy they named Thomas Lyon Bowes, was not the perfect heir they had prayed for. Not even close. The accounts from folklore, the whispers passed down from those who were supposedly in that room, paint a shocking picture. They describe a child born profoundly, almost unbelievably different. Now the descriptions vary, as they always do in these old tales. Some say he had a barrel-shaped chest with no neck and limbs that were, let's call them, more decorative than functional. One of the most famous and brutal descriptions calls him a human toad. Another, more bizarrely, describes him as looking like an enormous, flabby egg. Let's be clear, these are the cruel words of a terrified, superstitious era, not ours. But what they tell us is that Thomas was born with severe congenital deformities. So severe that in the eyes of his father, his family, and the rigid society they lived in, he was not a person. He was a problem. Imagine the Earl in that moment. The head of the family, the guardian of the brand. He's looking at his firstborn son, his heir, and all he can see is a catastrophic failure, a stain, a secret that if it got out would bring ridicule and ruin upon their house. It would be whispered about in London parlors. Their rivals would mock them. The perception of their strong, virile bloodline would be shattered. So he's faced with an impossible choice. Option A, you admit what's happened. You announce the birth of your disabled heir. You face the whispers, the pity, the shame. You let this imperfect child inherit the title and pray the family name survives the scandal. Option B, you tell the world the child died at birth. A neat, tragic, and most importantly, a final solution. But the legend of Glamis says the Earl chose a secret option C, an option so cold, so calculating, it could only be born from the unique pressures of the aristocracy. You don't acknowledge him, and you don't bury him. You erase him. You pretend he never existed while keeping him alive, hidden from every human eye, a living ghost within the walls of his own home. And so the first chapter of our narrative is written in two different inks. First, there's the official story, the one written for the public record. It is clean, it is clinical, and it is brutally efficient. The peerage records, the family Bible, they all state the same simple fact. Thomas Lyon Bowes, born October 21st, 1821, died the very same day. A terrible tragedy, of course. So sad for the noble family, but neat. No messy questions, no inconvenient bodies, no awkward succession issues, just a sad, dignified story of a fragile life cut short. Case closed. But the whispers in the castle's kitchens, the stories told over ale in the village of Glamis, they wrote the second version of the story, the one in invisible ink. They said the family doctor was sworn to a terrible oath of secrecy. They said the midwife who delivered the baby was given a sum of money so vast it would guarantee her silence, and was promptly shipped off to Australia, a convenient continent-sized hiding place. They said the stonemasons were called to the castle for a very specific, very secret job, and they said that the baby, Thomas, did not die. Somewhere in the sprawling, confusing labyrinth that is Glamis Castle, with its 150 rooms, its endless corridors, its dead ends and its secret staircases, a chamber was chosen. Maybe it was a forgotten priest hole from centuries of religious persecution. Maybe it was a cell, maybe it was just a suite of rooms at the end of a corridor they knew no one ever used. The legend says they bricked up the doorway, leaving only a secret passage, its entrance hidden behind a tapestry or a false wall. This room was to be Thomas's entire world, a nursery and a prison, a sanctuary and a tomb. His existence was now the family's most guarded secret. And then, as if to prove the cold logic of their decision, just over a year later, a second son was born to the Earl and his wife. A healthy boy, a strong boy, a perfect boy. This son, also named Thomas, confusingly enough, would grow up to become the 12th Earl of Strathmore. The line was secure. The brand was safe. The defective product had been successfully recalled from public view, and a new, improved model was ready to take its place. The problem of Thomas Lyon Bowes, it seemed, was solved. But it wasn't solved. It had just been contained. And the secret began to take on a life of its own. It became the central, unspoken horror at the heart of the Bowes-Lyon family. The legend says the secret became a terrible tradition, a rite of passage. When the reigning earl was on his deathbed, he would summon his heir, the man who would take his place. He would lead him through the castle's secret ways to the hidden chamber. He would show him his living, breathing, and now aging older brother, and he would pass on the burden of the secret, a crown of thorns to go along with the coronet. It's this tradition that supposedly led the 13th Earl to make his famously chilling statement to a friend. When pressed about the castle's secret, he allegedly said, "If you could even guess the nature of this castle's secret, you would get down on your knees and thank God it was not yours." For decades, the secret festered, and like any contained pressure, it started to leak. Anecdotes and strange stories began to bubble to the surface. The most famous, of course, is the story of the towels. The tale goes that a group of guests at the castle, perhaps after a few too many glasses of, let's call it, speculative brandy, decided they would solve the mystery once and for all. They devised a brilliantly simple plan. Each person went to their room and hung a white towel or a sheet out of their window. They covered every single window they could find. Then they all ran outside onto the grounds and looked back at the castle. And there it was, one single dark, unadorned window with no towel. A window to a room that didn't appear on any floor plan, a room they could not find. Another story, probably embellished over time, tells of a team of workmen who were doing repairs on the castle roof. They supposedly stumbled upon a hidden door on a remote part of the battlements. Overcome with curiosity, they opened it and peered into a long, dark passage. At the far end, they saw a sad, lonely figure, an old man with a long gray beard sitting in a chair. The moment they were spotted, the figure vanished and the door slammed shut. When they reported the incident to the Earl, they were allegedly paid off handsomely and told to emigrate from Scotland immediately and never ever speak of what they saw. Throughout the decades, staff and guests reported unsettling experiences, a strange rhythmic thumping sound coming from deep within the walls, a low, mournful cry heard late at night. The ghostly apparition of a bearded man was sometimes seen walking on a stretch of the roof, known as the Mad Earl's Walk. All of these sightings, all of these sounds were attributed to the spirit of the castle's hidden prisoner. And so, from a whispered secret in a birthing chamber, the story grew. It morphed into a village rumor, then a Gothic legend, a perfect horror story of aristocratic cruelty. It has all the elements: the cursed castle, the secret chamber, the monstrous prisoner. It's a fantastic, chilling tale. But is that all it is? A story? Or is there something more to it, a kernel of truth buried under a century of folklore? Can we find evidence in the historical record that points to what really happened inside that room? In the next part, we're going to stop just telling the story. We're going to start investigating it. We're going to put on our detective hats, open the cold case file on Thomas Lyon Bowes, and finally try to separate the man from the monster, the fact from the fiction. All right, we've heard the tale. The grand Gothic and frankly heartbreaking story of the secret prisoner of Glamis Castle. It is a perfect horror story, the kind you tell around a campfire. But this is Cursed Chambers. We don't just tell the story, we put it on trial. So now we take off the storyteller's cloak and we put on the detective's fedora. It's time to stop asking, "What's the story?" and start asking, "What's the evidence?" It's time to separate the folklore from the facts, the man from the myth, and the truth from the cover-up. Welcome to Part 4, the chamber where we officially open one of history's coldest cases. The charge on the table, is the systematic, lifelong illegal imprisonment and historical erasure of one Thomas Lyon Bowes. The defendant really is the entire aristocratic system of the 19th century, a system obsessed with its own perfection. And we, you and I, are the jury. And every jury needs to examine the evidence. So let's open the case file. Let's start with what the defense would present. Every defendant needs an alibi, a story that proves they couldn't have committed the crime. And the Bowes-Lyon family, our de facto defendants, have a very good one. It's clean, it's simple, and it's written in the history books. Let's call it Exhibit A, the official record. You can go look it up right now. The peerage records, the official family histories, all state very clearly that Thomas Lyon Bowes, firstborn son of the 11th Earl, was born on October 21st, 1821, and died the very same day. A tragedy, to be sure, but a neat one, a tidy one. There are no loose ends. It's the kind of alibi that is almost too perfect, isn't it? A story so convenient, so perfectly solving the family's succession problem that it almost begs you to look closer. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Because when you prosecute a case, you need to establish motive. Why would they commit this horrifying crime? Let's enter into the record Exhibit B, the overwhelming motive. We've touched on this, but let's be crystal clear. This wasn't just about a family being a bit embarrassed. This was about the survival of a dynasty. For Strathmore Incorporated, their entire corporate value was tied up in their brand of genetic superiority. A severely disabled heir wasn't just a sad turn of events, it was a stock market crash. It threatened their ability to make powerful marital alliances. It questioned their fitness to rule it, undermined their very identity. In their cold, hard world, the choice wasn't between love and shame. The choice was between the guaranteed survival of the family line and the acknowledged life of one, quote, unfortunate individual. When you look at it through their ruthless 19th century eyes, the motive isn't just plausible. It's practically a confession of intent. Okay, so we have a suspiciously convenient alibi and a terrifyingly strong motive. But that's all theory. What about witnesses? This is where the case gets truly compelling. Let's look at Exhibit C, the chorus of whispers. Now a skeptic would dismiss the stories we talked about in Part 3 as mere folklore. The midwife paid off and shipped to Australia, a local rumor. The workmen who saw a figure in a secret room and were told to emigrate. A tall tale from the pub. The guests playing games with towels in the windows, probably just, rich people being weird after too much wine. Individually, yes, you could dismiss each of these stories. But that's not how evidence works. You have to look at the pattern. What we have here are dozens of disconnected sources from different social classes, over the span of more than 60 or 70 years, all telling a slight variation of the exact same impossible story. A story about a secret room and a hidden heir. That's not folklore. That starts to look like corroboration. Accounts from the 1880s, for example, from the writer Augustus Heir, claim that he spoke directly with the Countess of Strathmore at the time, who was deeply troubled by the secret and the room which she confirmed existed. The sheer volume and consistency of the anecdotal evidence are staggering. It's like finding a dozen different people who all claim they saw a unicorn. After a while, you have to stop thinking they're all crazy and start wondering if you need to go looking for a unicorn. Next, let's consider the crime scene itself. Exhibit D, the accomplice. And the chief accomplice in this crime is Glamis Castle. If you were going to commit a crime like this, if you were going to hide a person for their entire life, you couldn't pick a better place. This isn't some modern open-plan house. This is a medieval fortress, a stone labyrinth designed for secrets. The castle is famous for its priest holes from the Reformation, for its hidden staircases for entire wings that were sealed off and forgotten. The very architecture of Glamis is one of concealment. The pre-existing legend of Earl Beardy, whether it's true or not, proves something vital. It proves that the idea of a sealed, inaccessible chamber, a room where a man could be locked away for all eternity, was already a part of the castle's identity. It was a known capability of the building, so hiding a room at Glamis wouldn't have been some radical new idea. It would have been in a twisted way traditional. The castle was built to keep secrets. The family just gave it a new and far more terrible one to keep. But let's be honest, the most damning evidence in this entire case doesn't come from rumors or servants. It comes from the family themselves. Let's open our final and most important file exhibit, the Veiled Confessions. These aren't written confessions, of course. They are far more subtle and far more chilling. Over the years, when pressed, members of the family have let slip statements that are soaked in guilt and dread. We have to come back to the words of the 13th Earl, who, when a friend pestered him about the secret, replied, "If you could even guess the nature of this castle's secret, you would get down on your knees and thank God it was not yours." Let's dissect that. That is not what you say about a family ghost. A ghost is scary, maybe even tragic, but a ghost is not your fault. It's not a burden that makes you thank God you're not the one responsible for it. That is the statement of a man tormented by an inherited duty, a living responsibility, a human secret. It reeks of guilt. Another family member supposedly confessed to a friend that she was on the verge of telling the secret, but her husband forbade it. The 14th Earl was described by his own son as living in a state of perpetual melancholy, which the son directly attributed to the terrible secret of the castle. These are not the statements of people guarding a quaint ghost story. These are the words of people who are links in a chain of conspiracy, each one weighed down by the horror of what was locked in that room. So let's step back and look at the case we've built. We have an official alibi that is so convenient, it's suspicious. We have a motive so powerful, it makes the crime seem almost inevitable from their perspective. We have a chorus of independent witnesses, all corroborating the same central fact for almost a century. We have a location and accomplice that was perfectly designed to conceal just such a crime. And finally, we have a series of what can only be described as veiled confessions from the very family at the heart of it all. When you lay it all out, the conclusion becomes almost impossible to avoid. The official story is the lie. The legend, in its essence, is the truth. There was no supernatural monster in Glamis Castle. There was a man, a son, a brother, and the rightful Earl of Strathmore, whose only crime was to be born in a way that profoundly embarrassed his powerful, prideful family. The cursed chamber wasn't just a hidden room of brick and mortar. It was a conspiracy of silence, a pact of shame passed down from father to son for generations. The curse wasn't demonic. It was a curse of blood, of ambition, and of the cold, calculating cruelty that can only be born from a desperate need to protect one's own legacy. The real monster in this story wasn't the prisoner, it was the jailers. And their crime, it seems, has been hiding in plain sight all along. Now, what does this all mean? What is the legacy of a secret like this? That's what we'll confront in the final part. So the trial is over. The case file is closed. We've looked past the suspiciously convenient official story, we've understood the crushing, almost corporate motive, and we've listened to the chorus of whispers from the past that, when heard together, become a roar. We have stepped through the looking glass of folklore and found ourselves in a place that feels terrifyingly real. Welcome to The Echo. This is where we stop looking at the evidence itself and instead look at the ghost it left behind. The fallout, the legacy, and the dark human meaning at the heart of the Glamis mystery. Let's start then with the final verdict. Based on the overwhelming weight of the circumstantial evidence, the strength of the motive, the corroborating testimony, and the veiled confessions of the family itself. The verdict of this chamber is that the story of the monster of Glamis, in its tragic human essence, is true. Let's be absolutely clear what that means. There was no monster. There was no supernatural beast roaming the halls. There was a man. His name was Thomas Lyon Bowes. He was the firstborn son, the rightful heir to one of the great titles and estates of Scotland. And his family, the very people who should have been his staunchest protectors, chose instead to become his jailers. They didn't just lock him in a room, they locked him out of history. They committed what might be the perfect crime, not a murder of the body perhaps, but a murder of a life, an assassination of an identity. They allowed his body to live for decades while ensuring that as a person, he was never truly alive. It is a crime of almost unimaginable cruelty made all the more chilling because it was carried out not in a fit of passionate rage, but as a calm, rational business decision. So what was the result of this perfectly executed conspiracy of silence? Did it work? Did the Earls of Strathmore successfully protect their precious brand? Did they manage to keep the family name pristine and unblemished? Well, for a time, perhaps it seemed so. They had a new, healthy heir. The line continued. The secret was kept. But in the long run, their plan was a spectacular, catastrophic failure, because secrets, especially secrets as dark and as heavy as this one, they don't just disappear when you lock them in a room. They fester. They have a weight and a gravity all their own. They leak through the cracks in the walls, they seep into the soil of the place, and eventually, they mutate into something far bigger and far more powerful than the original truth ever was. And here we arrive at the beautiful, brutal, and ultimate irony of the entire Glamis affair. In their desperate, prideful attempt to erase what they saw as a stain on their family history, the Bowes-Lyons accidentally created a legend far more infamous, far more enduring, and far more damaging to their reputation than any simple truth they tried to hide. They were terrified of being known as the family with the deformed heir. But because of their actions, they are known forever in the annals of dark history as the family who walled up their own child. They tried to hide their shame, and in doing so, they immortalized it. Their greatest secret became their most famous and most terrible legacy. And think of how that legacy has rippled through time. Consider the almost surreal contrast. Decades after the prisoner of Glamis likely took his last lonely breath in that hidden chamber, the very same castle with that same dark secret sleeping in its stone heart became the celebrated, idyllic childhood home of a beloved future Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Imagine that for a moment. Picture the young lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon playing in the sun-drenched gardens, attending parties in the great halls. Completely unaware, perhaps, that the spooky ghost story the staff whispered about wasn't just a story, that the ghost of the Mad Earl's Walk was, in fact, the hidden tragedy of her own great-granduncle. The fairy tale castle of the 20th century, a symbol of royal grace and stability, was built directly on the foundations of a true-life Gothic horror story from the 19th. It is a stunning, almost dizzying juxtaposition. And that brings us to the final and most important question. What does this all mean? What is the final human insight we can take away from this particular cursed chamber? Because the secret room at Glamis, the chamber itself, is more than just a place. It's a symbol. It's a powerful, terrifying symbol of that dark space that exists in all powerful families, in all great corporations, in all political institutions. It's the metaphorical room down the hall where inconvenient truths, uncomfortable realities, and inconvenient people are sent to be forgotten. It's the place where morality is sacrificed for the sake of public relations. The true curse of Glamis was never supernatural. It wasn't a witch's hex or a deal with the devil. The curse was entirely depressingly human. It was the curse of pride, the curse of ambition, the curse of believing that the image of your family is more valuable than a member of your family. It's the quiet, cold-blooded belief that a person, a human life, can be reduced to a problem, an issue, to be managed, an inconvenience to be hidden away so that the perfect public facade can remain shiny and intact. The story of Thomas Lyon Bowes is a profound and chilling reminder that the strongest prisons in this world are not built of brick and stone. They are built of shame, of fear, and of silence. And the most truly monstrous acts in human history are rarely committed with a villain's cackle and a flourish of a cape. They are committed quietly. They are committed in secret rooms by well-dressed, respectable people who justify their actions with the same devastatingly simple excuse: it's for the good of the family. This story teaches us that the thing we should fear most is not the monster that might be locked in the attic. It's the smiling, respectable family downstairs who turned the key. What do you think? After hearing all of this, what is your verdict? It's a horrible question to consider, isn't it? Let us know what you believe in the comments below. Thank you for joining us in this particularly dark and sorrowful chamber. If you want to continue questioning the official story and unlocking the secrets of the past, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember that history is full of locked rooms. You just have to be willing to find the right key.